Welcome back, guys. We have a very special video today going over all the different settings that I do both in-game and out of game to just make sure I play at the highest level possible on mouse and keyboard. I'm going to start with my in-game settings, and I'm just going to kind of explain everything as we go here. First thing we're going to talk about is your sensitivity, and this is going to be different for everyone. You know, some players play on a very slow sensitivity, and some players play on a very fast sensitivity. And it really boils down to just what feels best for you, but I would definitely recommend starting slow and then just raising it as much as you can until you find that kind of sweet spot for you. Me, personally, I play at 1600 DPI at 3 sensitivity. You'll notice by the way I mount my arm and wrist on the table that most of the time, I stay pretty mounted at the wrist, and I fingertip grip my mouse, and that's where most of my range of motion goes, which is why I generally play at a faster sensitivity. But for most people, you're going to be arm aiming, moving your mouse this way, so you're probably going to find yourself playing on a slower sensitivity. The big recommendation I would make is to start at a higher DPI and then have a lower sense, as it helps counter something that happens called DPI deviation. And what happens is that your mouse won't reach its maximum polling rate because it's not getting enough movement to be able to reach those numbers. So what a lot of people do to counteract this is that they'll play at a higher DPI but a lower in-game sense. This is something that I've only changed somewhat recently, but I have noticed it's made a big difference on how smooth my tracking has felt. If you wanted to learn more, Optimum actually has a very great video on this, and he explains it far better than I ever could. It's definitely worth a watch if you have a second. Again, I play at 1600 DPI at 3.06 sensitivity, and that's going to be pretty much the same for everything. And my ADS sensitivity is just a little bit slower at 0.9. Now again, this is kind of personal preference. What I would recommend is if you're just starting or if you're in a beginner phase, just play at a 1. That way you don't have to learn 2 different sensitivities. If I were to do it all over again, that's probably what I would do. Next up, I want you to go over to mouse advanced settings, where we'll find a couple things that we want to change over here. We're going to be looking at ADS sensitivity transition timing. And now this is one that made a substantial impact on my level of consistency in my aim. And I think the reason for that is it instantly goes from your hipfire sense to your ADS sense. It instantly applies that multiplier. And I think the issue was when it is gradual, it either slowly increases or decreases your sensitivity until it reaches that moment. And for me, that kind of just led to a lot of inconsistencies, and I feel like my aim was all over the place because that muscle memory of that ADS sensitivity I had wasn't being applied instantaneously. And basically, that's just kind of eliminating less randomness and more consistency in your aim. Next up, you want to go down to mouse calibration, and you just want to make sure all this is set to 0 or off. Again, our goal is to just be as consistent as possible, so we don't want any sort of mouse acceleration or mouse filtering messing with your aim at all. Mouse wheel delay is really kind of personal preference. I have mine set on 50, that way it still feels pretty responsive, but at the same time I'm still not over scrolling. That's going to be it for our in-game sensitivity settings, so now let's go take a look at the keybinds and see what we can do. There's going to be a lot of different settings, and again, I'll try to explain it the best I can as we go here. First thing I changed is my system key behavior. I know some people like to have this set to operating system, but for me, I don't trust myself, and I didn't want to accidentally hit the Windows key at any point and it ends up tabbing me out of my game or something, so I decided to game, even though I don't actually use it as a keybind. Most of this is pretty self-explanatory. My prone and dive is set to Z, and my crouch and slide is set to X. So again, both my dive and my slide are independent keybinds, and I think that's really important to just make the most of your movement in this game. The more things that you can set to individual keybinds, the more in control of your character you are going to be in this game. You'll also note that I have my crouch and slide as X and my prone and dive as Z, which are these 2 bottom buttons right here. And the reason I do that is I want to be able to freely move with WASD with my main fingers and then be able to press all the movement buttons with my thumb. Especially with Omni movement, it's really important to have access to your movement keys at all times without having to lift off any of those buttons to press a dive or a slide. That allows me to strafe in any direction, move in any direction, be able to slide and dive in any direction, again, without having to lift my fingers off the movement keys. The really cool thing about mouse and keyboard is that you can actually set a designated keybind to your mantle key. What that allows me to do is whenever I'm jumping over a window, through a door frame, you know, all that kind of different stuff, I can actually go ahead and press my mantle keybind and that'll do it automatically. There's so many awkward sized windows and door frames in this game that you'll need to jump through, and so being able to have this mantle keybind set without having to have the auto mantles set is really huge. That way you can kind of jump freely in gunfights without the risk of accidentally mantling and it just throwing your entire gunfight. Having that mantle keybind is super important for just seamless movement. So say I'm on this window right here, I can actually mantle right straight over that, and it's actually going to be a pretty fast animation. You can actually just kind of mantle back and forth like this, and it's super easy to move over things. Now, if I were trying to jump over that, you'll just see that sometimes it just kind of leads to awkward moments where you're just not fitting through the window right away. And with how fast the TTK in this game, that's not something that you want to get caught doing. Next up, we have weapon mount, which is currently set to mouse 5, and then I also have my melee, my finishing move, and body shield set to mouse 4. These are my only two mouse side buttons that I have. I don't really have any super important keybinds set to my mouse side buttons just because I do have to slightly grip my mouse a different way in order to press those buttons. When you have to change your grip on your mouse to press those side buttons, you're just going to notice your aim is a little bit more inconsistent than you'd like. So if you find yourself having to constantly reposition your thumb and it just kind of feels uncomfortable when you're shooting at someone, you just want to choose keybinds that just don't have a direct impact in your gunfights, which is why I chose melee, because when I'm meleeing, I'm really not aiming all that much. As long as you're aiming in their general direction, then you're going to hit them with the melee. The other one I have is weapon mount. Obviously, most of the time I'm going to hit that well before I'm even aiming at someone, so I can reposition my mouse grip to be the way that I want it to be before I even start the gunfight. Again, I wouldn't put any super important keybinds in your mouse. You want to be able to make sure that your mouse grip is as consistent as possible, so having to constantly reposition your thumb is just not something that you want to mess with. Next up, we have our lethal and our tactical equipment. You'll actually notice that I have these reversed. By default, your tac equipment is going to be Q and your lethal is going to be E. The reason I do this is actually because I came from Destiny 2 and your grenades keybind was always set to Q. So I just have these swapped up. It's always how I remember things, but there's no real reason you need to swap these up. Next up, for field upgrade, armor plate, item, and interact, again, will all be bottom row thumb buttons. Interact I have as C because that is a button you're going to be using the most often. From reviving players to hopping in vehicles to picking up items, like this is going to be your main keybind. So the reason I chose C is because it is one of the most natural buttons for me to press. It is really easy for me to go from the spacebar, which is my thumb's natural resting point, up to the C button in order to use the interact button. Again, I want to be able to move freely with my WASD and leave these fingers on the keybind while being able to press the interact button at the same time. Having that freedom of movement is going to be one of the most important things that you can do, which is why, again, you should prioritize putting keybinds on your bottom row that you can hit with your thumb. So again, I would not recommend having your interact key set to F. I would try and use one of the bottom row thumb buttons. Not really using any of these other ones too often anyway, except for maybe push to talk. I do have that as caps lock right now, so I can always just press it pretty naturally if I have to, if I want to talk to anybody. Next up, we got our movement settings, and right away they added something new called Sprint Assist, and this is basically this game's version of Auto Tactical Sprint or Auto Sprint. Right now I have it set to on, not Tactical Sprint Assist. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And you want to make sure your Sprint Assist is set to 0. So that means as soon as I hit one of my movement keys, WASD, I'm instantly going to be sprinting in that direction. The way that Omni movement is implemented into this game, it really feels awkward to not have this set to on. As soon as I press any of my movement keys, I'm instantly sprinting in that direction. And again, once I'm sprinting, I'm immediately able to slide or dive in any direction. Your mantle assist, you definitely want to keep that off, especially if you have that dedicated mantle keybind. That way you're not accidentally mantling in the middle of a gunfight or something. Craft assist, also, you can go ahead and turn that off. Corner slice, I went ahead and turned that off also. Even though this doesn't mess with your aim at all, it is just visually just kind of weird to me. I felt like it was just messing me up. So I went ahead and turned that off. Again, this one's kind of personal preference, but if you just wanted it to work like classic Call of Duty, then yeah, just turn this one off. Sprint restore and slide maintain sprint, I definitely have those ones turned off because I just feel like they led to more dead slides. And again, you want to be in complete control of your character as much as possible. Mantle cancels reload, I do have set to on just because I'd rather be able to have more fluid movement without the game telling me no just because I'm in the middle of a reload. Grounded mantle, make sure you turn that off. Again, you should be using your dedicated mantle keybind, and if you don't have it yet or you're too scared to, just give it a try. You know, what's the worst that could happen? Give it a try and learn it, and you're gonna be thankful that you did, trust me. Slide dive activation, again, you want to have as much control over your character as possible, so being able to have multiple buttons set to different binds is super important. Make sure this is on independent. Moving on to tactical sprint activation, I have this set to single tap run. So now all I need to do to go instantly into my tactical sprint is to press my shift key once. Because I have the sprint assist on, if I press my W key or any of my other movement keys, I'm already sprinting in that direction. I feel like this is another super important setting. Some people just play on tactical sprint assist on that one, but the reason I don't is because, again, I want to have more control over my character. The tactical sprint to fire speed is very slow compared to just your regular sprint to fire speed. Another big one is your weapon mount exit. You want to make sure that is set to instant. You don't want any sort of delay when you're trying to get out of a weapon mount. That's going to be it for our in-game settings. There are a few different Windows settings that you can change, and I'll show you those right now. The first thing we're going to want to look for is our Windows mouse settings. So the easiest way to kind of navigate to those is just go into the bottom corner down here and type in mouse. Go over to mouse system settings here, and then you want to look for additional mouse settings. Go over here and it should bring up this window right here. Go over to pointer options, and there's two things you want to do here. You want to make sure your enhanced pointer precision is disabled, make sure it's unchecked. This adds mouse acceleration and again adds more inconsistencies to your aim. Make sure that's disabled and completely turned off. The last thing you want to do in this window is actually make sure that this bar right here is set to the exact middle between slow and fast. That's going to make sure that you are using the raw input on your mouse and there's no adding or subtracting any additional sensitivities. Go ahead and exit out of all of that and you should be good to go. That is going to be it for today's video. Thank you guys so much. If you did learn something new, maybe drop a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It really helps me out. It takes me a long time to make these videos, so I'd really appreciate it. I hope you all have a wonderful day and I'll see you next time.